Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Haqiqat Show, where we discuss religion and politics, the two least controversial subjects. My name is Daniel Haqiqatjou. I'm your host, and today we have a great show planned for you, where we're going to talk about the recent news about the US and France and Israel completely banning certain social media outlets or news outlets, channels. We're going to talk about these bannings and what they mean for the political situation in the West currently. And then we're also going to continue our series looking at how Zionism affects different religions such as Christianity, Islam, and even atheism. So we had in episode 2 an overview of the history of Christian Zionism. We talked about the Scofield Bible, John Hagee, Pastor Billy Graham, etc., how this Christian Zionism came to be in the 20th century. We're going to now today in this episode look at Islamic Zionism and how the same types of efforts are being used to make Muslims more accepting of Zionism and the state of Israel. So these things are happening under the noses of many Muslims, unfortunately. So we want to look at some of the developments on this front. We'll also look at atheistic Zionism. This is also a significant phenomenon with a new atheist movement with figures like Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Bill Maher, etc. This is also an interesting history that we'll cover to complete the series on how Zionism tries to reform and influence religions to make religions more favorable to Israel. And we're also going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do some reaction videos. I'm going to look at some short videos that have been sent by our viewers and others who, I'll react to those videos. And some of them I think are pretty funny. So we'll have that as well at about the middle of the show, inshallah. So let's get started by talking about media and this outrageous double standard of how the West will control news channels, media outlets, big tech companies, and none of that is seen as authoritarian. But the West at the same time will point to countries like Russia, Iran, and China or North Korea and say how their media operations, their media outlets and news channels are state-run. And this is pure authoritarianism. At the same time, they'll accuse these countries that are contrary to Western interests, Western hegemony, and they'll say, well, these countries are censoring information. They're spreading misinformation or disinformation while at the same time promoting their own media sources or their state-run outlets. And this is authoritarianism, whereas we in the West, we promote free speech, free discourse, freedom of thought. That's the pinnacle of Western democracy. This is the pinnacle of Western freedom. So this kind of distinction is being made between the West and the rest. Let's look more closely at this hypocrisy and let's investigate how exactly the West controls media sources in a way that's just as authoritarian as what we see in the East or in countries like Russia, China, North Korea, etc. I'm not saying that there's an exact similarity. There are nuances and complexities that we have to go over. I'm not trying to give a simplistic equivalence here. In fact, within the West, the level of control is more sophisticated and therefore more nefarious. It's more nefarious. It's more problematic the way that media is controlled in the West by governments and these powerful interest groups. So getting right into it, we can look at some of the bans that are happening of things like Russia Today, things like Xinhua, the Chinese news source, Rumble. So let me pull up these, the share screen so you can see some of the news here. So here's the recent report from about the banning of Russia Today, Sputnik. This was 2 years ago. these, Russian-controlled news agencies were banned in the West. So this is in the EU, in Europe, they were banned. You also had certain social media apps that had to ban Russia Today, for example. This is from 2 years ago. Then in France, you have the banning of Rumble. And this is from Le Monde. Rumble is an unmoderated video platform. Therefore, it has to be blocked because it's a refuge of the ultra-right, particularly Americans. The platform also hosts Russian media accounts banned in Europe, such as Russia Today. So even if a social media company refuses to ban a news source like Russia Today, it will still get banned by the EU or by the US. The app is going to get banned, for example. This was also an issue with Telegram. Telegram had to ban Russia Today, even though Telegram itself is an app from Russia, developed in Russia, owned in Russia. They had to ban Russia Today in its U.S. and Europe-based, for its American and EU-based users. Sorry. Why? Because if they didn't, then the Android or the Apple Store, the Google Store would have banned Telegram app from their stores because they are allowing Russia Today, for example. So this is a pernicious problem. You also had news of a TikTok ban in France. There's also the U.S. government seizing domains, so even websites that are associated with the Iranian government. So Press TV, for example, is banned. TikTok, of course, recently banned by the U.S. government, by Congress. So TikTok is trying to fight this, but it's a futile fight because why are they doing this? It's because of the fact that they can't control TikTok. So TikTok is based out of China. The U.S. will ban anything that it can't control. And then you have the news recently of Israel banning Al Jazeera. The only democracy in the Middle East also is banning this major news agency, Al Jazeera. So this is outright bannings. Okay, so it's the most obvious type of control over media when you just outright ban certain news agencies or news corporations or apps. So that's the most overt type. But there are more subtle ways that the government in the West controls media and therefore controls what the population thinks, what the population knows about the outside world. So this is the topic of today's discussion. So you have these governments that are controlling the media outlets. Russia controls Russia Today. Chinese government controls Xinhua. You have Iran controlling Press TV. This is overt control of the public news channels or news outlets. But you have the same thing in the West. You have Britain's BBC, you have France 24, you have Canada's CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Channel. So these are, what's the difference then? These outlets are also controlled by the government. What is claimed is that, well, this kind of control is not really control. The government is just regulating to make sure that the highest quality information comes out of the BBC or the CBC or France 24, etc. The role of the government is just to prevent the spread of misinformation or the spread of hate or extremism or conspiracy theories. That's why you have this type of connection between the government and these media channels. You need an accurate source of information, and the government is going to guarantee that accurate source of information through these high-profile media outlets. Whereas the same kind of relationship, if it exists in Russia or Iran or China or North Korea, this is just authoritarian control by those governments to brainwash the population. So there's no inconsistency between government control of a media outlet and free speech as long as it's in the West. If it's outside of the West, in these other countries, then this is authoritarianism. This is the lack of freedom of speech. This is government crackdown of free thought. This is the kind of dichotomy that is created. And this is just an outrageous, like obvious double standard. And it's shocking that it doesn't amount to more than that. It doesn't amount to, there's not even much of a presumption of a difference. But that kind of narrative that there's a real difference between Russia having its media outlets and the US and the UK and France having their media outlets, that's a big difference. That is a significant difference that we should chalk up to the freedoms that we have in the West. So what's happened in the last decade is that there's been a Western decline in power compared to the rest of the world. You have other countries that are rising in terms of their GDP, in terms of their economic and political power. So how have Western countries responded to this? They have banned. They have banned these outlets because once your power starts decreasing, you have to exert much more overt controls. You have to exert overt type of power to shut things down. Whereas if you're already so far ahead in terms of your power and your wealth, you can just flood the market with your influence. You can just buy as much influence as possible, and your narrative is going to win out by sheer force of money and power. But as the tides turn and things start to get on more of an even playing field, then you have to start playing dirty. Then you have to say, okay, enough fun and games. Time to shut these guys down. Time to shut them up. And you ideally don't want to do that, because when you do that, it shows that you're a sore loser. It shows that, okay, you can't handle competition. You have to shut it down. You can't play fair. So the U.S. Before could always claim that, we allow different perspectives. We allow different voices. We unlike these authoritarian governments, we will allow other people who criticize us and people who spread, these kinds of conspiracy theories. We're not threatened by these kooks. They could have this kind of open hand attitude because they're just so much more powerful and could, just by sheer force of will, push the Western narrative throughout the world, mostly unopposed. But as these other countries start catching up in terms of their production, in terms of their influence, then the charade is over. Then you have to say, okay, that's the end of that. And that harms, the reputation of the West, because the hypocrisy becomes very obvious. So I showed you the examples. It's not just one outlet. It's many at this point, and more are on the chopping block. So Rumble is cut. TikTok is cut. Press TV, Russia Today, Sputnik, Xinhua, on and on. So this is getting to be major reputational damage to the West. So what's other than outright banning? It's not like this kind of control over the media is something new, or it only consists of banning. There's other ways to control media. And I'll explain how this is done. But if you want a more in-depth analysis of media control and this kind of farce of liberal freedom in the West and freedom of thought, we have a full course at Alesna Institute where I teach. It's an on-demand course. You can watch at your leisure these lectures, and the name of the course is Liberal Mind Control. And it comes with its own book that you can also download and read that we've produced with all the references, so you can get a good appreciation of this charade or this farce of free speech that's being used, has been used to attack Islam, attack Muslim societies and non-Western societies in general, that in the West we're free, we have all of the free speech and free thought that you could want, and everywhere else they have to exercise authoritarian control because their ideas are not good enough to thrive in the free market, whereas our ideas are so compelling and so inherently rational that we don't need to control anything. People will just gladly accept Western liberalism, democracy, women's rights, women's rights, LGBT. The world is ready to accept these ideas. We just have to be allowed to present them. Whereas authoritarian regimes have to, the only way that people will stick to those ideas, those dogmas, is through coercion. This is the dichotomy that's created, but it's all a ruse. So the course goes into that. Sign up for that course if you're interested at esna.org. Okay, so let's talk about how this kind of control over Western media happens. It starts at the Western educational institution. So you have to be credentialed, go through the college system in order to be able to work in the media. And the college system is overtly liberal. It's dedicated to this kind of scientific, purely scientific worldview. You have this liberal ideology, liberal morality. And of course, when I refer to liberalism, I'm talking about philosophical liberalism, not left wing. I just mean the idea of freedom and democracy and equality as values, the overall overarching philosophical liberal ideology that began in the Enlightenment. So just to be clear about that. So in order to go through the college system and get that degree, you have to be committed to this kind of purely scientific worldview. You are committed to upholding political correctness. You oppose conspiracy theories. And that's what Western education requires. If you want to do well in school, and anyone who has gone into college, you know that if you don't have necessarily that perspective, then you're going to face a lot of pressure or resistance. Wanting you're definitely not going to be able to go on and do graduate studies. And many Muslims experience this because they go to college wanting to go into Islamic studies, for example. They want to go and teach Islam as a university professor, but then they realize that, well, if you don't adopt certain liberal perspectives on religion, and specifically Islam, then you're going to not be taken seriously. You're not going to be promoted. You're not going to find advisors, etc. And so you have many Muslims who kind of double code themselves in the sense that they present themselves to the department, to their students, as this liberal academic, whereas in their private lives, they're committed Muslims who have many illiberal views that they have to hide. If they express those views in the university setting or to their students or to their department, then they'll be ousted or they'll lose their job or they won't be granted tenure, for example. So this is the educational system. So that, without going into much deeper level on the educational system, that is what leads to being working within the media establishment. So the primary way that these media institutions operate and control what's presented is through marginalization. So if you are not adopting this kind of liberal perspective, this purely scientific worldview, then you're marginalized just like you are in the educational institutions. You're not going to get a position at the media institutions, editors of the newspapers, producers of these broadcast programs or even movies. You're not going to get those kinds of roles unless you're fully committed to this liberal scientific worldview. Other perspectives are marginalized. And again, Muslims have experience with this. If you want to have this kind of Muslim TV show, or you want to have some kind of movie or program that is presenting Islam or presenting Muslims, it has to be a liberalized view on Muslims. You yourself have to be a liberal Muslim because you have to be okay with many things that the religion forbids. You know, the religion forbids drinking alcohol. The religion forbids nudity. But these are the things that you have to be okay with if you want to be successful in the industry or to get a contract. And you have different Muslims who have been in this industry who will attest to this. So I'm not saying anything that is controversial on that regard. So you have this kind of control. And the thing to keep in mind also is the technological aspect. There's been a revolution in communications technology over the past 200 to 300 years. For most of human history, you had text, so written text. So anyone could write something and disseminate it to students, and that was technologically limited because you can only produce so many copies of your text by hand. You can't really distribute it far and wide to thousands of people. It's a very time-consuming process as well. So that was all changed by the printing press. The printing press allowed much wider distribution of material because you can just copy a text very quickly and produce hundreds and thousands of copies that are then sold. So your writing can reach a lot more people. It's relatively cheap to mass produce newspapers or books or pamphlets, etc. And then you also have telecommunication, so radio, television, film, movies. This is another way that technology allowed mass distribution. You can reach thousands, millions of people. But the thing is that even though you can reach more people, it's much more expensive. It's much more expensive, and there's a higher bar of entry. So, for example, if you're just writing your own manuscript and you're copying it by hand and then you're distributing it, anyone can do that. You have the ability to reach, 5 or 10 people, or you can hand out your flyers, for example, in a neighborhood. But if you want to have your own television company, if you want to be able to have even your own radio station, then there is a high bar of entry. You have to meet all kinds of regulatory requirements. You have to be able to buy the equipment, which is quite expensive. You basically have to spend millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to start things from the ground up. So this is a very high bar of entry that prevents everyone except the extremely wealthy from having these types of outlets. So this means that all media is controlled by an extremely small number of people. And when it comes to media production, this is not unique because many products, other kinds of products, not media related, have a high bar of entry. If you want to, produce cars, you want to start a car company. Not anyone, not me and you. We can't start car companies. Elon Musk can start his own car company, Tesla, and start producing cars because he has the capital to put into the hundreds of millions required to start producing his own vehicles and have his own car company. So all production within these modern societies, capitalist societies, have a high bar of entry. And that's why you have these conglomerates. So if we look at conventional media, there's conventional media and there's digital media. So both of these we can look at separately. But what is shared between them is that there's a small group of people, a small group of conglomerates that control all of the media outlets. In conventional media, this is very clear. So conventional media includes things like TV, radio, movies, newspapers, books, magazines. Digital media, meaning websites, social media, apps, online videos, video games. These are all digital media. So there's just a small number of corporations, big corporations, that control all of these outlets, and they are controlled by these conglomerates. So here's a visual. So you can see that there are 6 major, when it comes to conventional media, there are 6 major conglomerates operating So Time Warner, Comcast, Disney, Viacom, Sony, and News Corp. So, all of it seems like these are all just independent, separate operations. Like, oh, there's CNN, and then there's Fox News, and then there's ESPN and NBC, and these are all separate companies operating independently. But then when you see that they're all controlled by just 6 conglomerates, then that illusion of independence and diversity, having multiple perspectives, that all vanishes. You realize that, okay, it's just a few hands at play. And if there's a few hands at play, that makes things a lot easier to control. So you have this kind of illusion of independent media operating separately from each other, and it becomes implausible to think, well, does the government control every single one? Or does the government influence every single one of these hundreds of different outlets? But then when you break that illusion and you say, actually, these hundreds of outlets are all bunched under 6 conglomerates, just 6, then it becomes more plausible that there could be government influence on these just 6 conglomerates. So this is something that is quite shocking for a lot of people. And the problem, especially, like, these are all American companies, but because of the influence of America, these companies become global media companies. So something like the New York Times is read all over the world. Something like Disney, like movies produced by Disney or Universal Studios, these things are consumed all over the world because of the influence of the US. So these conglomerates are clearly allied with the US government, and their allegiance is to the US government. And this is most obvious because of their endorsement of liberal norms. They endorse this kind of liberal perspective, and they present the United States as mostly a benign and legitimate government, and the enemies of the United States are portrayed as illegitimate, terrorist, authoritarian. This is what we typically see from 99% of Western media. There's not really material that fundamentally questions the authority and the moral authority of the United States. Yeah, there can be examples of movies that depict the United States as being run by certain bad actors, but there's nothing that will question the moral legitimacy of democracy, the moral legitimacy of freedom and maximizing people's freedom, maximizing equality, like gender equality. These are things that go completely unquestioned, and the United States is portrayed as the underlying values of the United States and the U.S. government are portrayed as being superior, being legitimate, and a big contributing factor to this is that you don't really see movies or programs or news documentaries that are committed to conspiracy theories. If you start, like, let's have a documentary about the true story of 9/11, for example, or the true story of the JFK assassination, those are independently produced. You're not going to see that type of programming coming out in theaters or coming out, on these major news channels, or that do have like these multi-million-dollar budgets. Those types of programs, even if they're fictional, but it's like a premise of some fictional TV series or movie, even that is not really portrayed. Now, is it because the government is saying, hey, don't undermine our narrative on these historical facts? Like, don't undermine our narrative when it comes to World War II or when it comes to, the wars in the Middle East. That's not how it works necessarily, even though it's possible, as we see with these recent bannings of outright overt bannings of some of these foreign outlets. But what usually happens is that people who are inclined to question the government, people who are inclined to really espouse these types of conspiracy theories, they don't get jobs. They don't get jobs at these major media corporations. They don't get to rise through the ranks because they are marginalized for the kinds of views that they have. The type of person who is going to climb the ladder at Time Warner is the type of person who, really loves President Joe Biden, for example, and the person who rises the ranks in News Corp. Maybe he loves the CIA and he loves American patriotism and Donald Trump, and he's 100% establishment minded. NPC, basically. Those are the types that are rising the ranks, and they make the decisions. So it's like gatekeeping, basically. The people who go through the gate and rise the ranks, they've already been vetted to be loyalists to the U.S. government. And there are ways that the U.S. government will actually reward these kinds of outlets, specifically when it comes to the news, for example. When it comes to the news, if you are a reporter who is seen as loyal in spreading government narratives, then you're going to get better access. You're going to get the interviews with the president or with the congressman. You're going to get sources, intelligent sources, state XYZ. You're going to get the scoop. You're going to get the exclusives. And when you get that, then you're going to rise in the ranks. Your career is going to be greatly boosted. And this is how the U.S. government keeps news agencies in line. If you're going to start publishing things that are contrary to our narrative, then you're going to be cut off. We're not going to talk to you. We're going to talk to your competitors. We're not going to give you the exclusive information, which most of the time turns out to be disinformation. We're going to give it to your competitors. So this is, or for example, if you give a positive portrayal of Russia, you give a positive portrayal of Iran and China, your career is going to be torpedoed. You're going to not have a career. This is the way that it works. And again, it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. Both parties are working in the same way. They're just different wings of the overall U.S. government. Okay. So it doesn't matter if it's like a public company like BBC or CBC, France 24. It doesn't matter if it's public or it's private. The private companies, it's the same. The public companies, they will lose funding or they'll get fired. Basically, if you are going contrary to the government narrative, you're going to be canned. It's pretty simple, and there are examples of that. But what about private media? So in the US, most of the major media companies are private. And like I said, the way that they're controlled is by getting certain treats. The government will give them certain treats for staying in line. This is how the people who control these media companies, they are very close to the government, and there's a type of a loyalty that they have to the government. And oftentimes you'll see former government officials will, when they, their term is over in Congress, for example, or they, maybe there's a Democrat in the State Department, and then when Trump becomes president, then that official, he joins CNN, or he joins as an analyst, MSNBC or Fox News or what have you. So you have government officials who are literally commentators within these major news corporations. So it's not like there's really a difference between the government and these private news corporations. There's kind of a revolving door phenomenon where you have people in the government who are coming and serving as commentators or even serving as board members of these major private corporations. So these are this is not like an adversarial relationship at all. It's basically, it's two heads of the same overall operation. And there are also very overt examples of government control of the media. For example, Operation Mockingbird. So what was Operation Mockingbird? You had the CIA. So this was in 1977 that this was revealed. But the CIA was shown to have, over the past 24 years, more than 400 American journalists that had been working for the CIA. They were either spying, they were aiding spies, they were circulating false propaganda from the CIA. So a lot of media executives were implicated in this from all the major media outlets. So Time Inc., New York Times, the American Broadcasting Company, ABC, National Broadcasting Company, Associated Press, Reuters, Hart Newspapers, Scripps Howard, Newsweek Magazine, Miami Herald, New York Herald Tribune, and on and on and on. So this is documented, and only like the most naive NPC would say something like, oh, well, that was in 1977. Obviously today the government would never do something like that, would never try to overtly control private media companies. But this shows like you can easily bribe, even if there's nothing on the books, like a formal relationship, which says that, well, before the New York Times publishes this article, you got to get a stamp of approval from the director of the CIA. Even if it's not something that overt, it's still, okay, behind closed doors or underneath the table, there are incentives that are given. If you publish this, like we strongly suggest, like you publish this report about Russia or about China or about Iran or about Hamas or about any narrative, or about, you know, the COVID vaccine or whatever. We highly advise you to publish this, and we highly advise you not to publish this. And, you know, I'll see you next week at the golf tournament, or I'll see you next week on the green. These are all buddies. They're all working together in this kind of social, quasi-social, corporate, governmental relationship. So this is the way things happen. You have to play ball to get by. And then, you know, you have these scandals that will come up every now and then, like Operation Mockingbird. You also have Cato Institute here, for example, is reporting how the national security state manipulates the news media. The American people who count on the news profession to provide them with accurate, independent information about foreign affairs are the ultimate victims. So you can read this report. But this is something well known and documented. You also have scandals like actual foreign agents who are embedded in the media conglomerate infrastructure, like Robert Maxwell. The murky life and death of Robert Maxwell. This was reported in The Guardian. Basically, he turns out to be a Mossad agent. He's a billionaire, but he's also tied to Mossad. And he owns a number of British publishing companies like Pergamon Press, the British Printing Corporation, Mirror Group, Macmillan Publishers. These are major publishers. He's a media mogul, but he also has ties to Mossad. This was Times of Israel is publishing. For writer who broke Epstein case, a rumored Mossad link is worth digging to. So the source of Jeffrey Epstein's billions is Maxwell, is certain connections that he has to Maxwell, who's connected to the Mossad. So people have been putting two and two together, and they're saying, well, this seems to be very strong evidence that Jeffrey Epstein is also linked to the Israeli intelligence. So we see a lot of these types of scandals that reveal basically how things are run with these major media corporations. So when it comes to the so-called authoritarian states like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, it's just assumed that the government is heavily influencing media companies and forcing them to spread false propaganda. And this is not the same as in the West, where people have the freedom. These companies are independent, they're private, they are not forced to publish anything. But if you do claim this about the Western governments, like I've been doing in this show, then I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I am basically a kook because, of course, you know, the serious Western governments and media companies, everything is professional and above board. Right? So only the most naive NPCs will believe this, especially given the types of facts that are revealed constantly about how this is completely not true. So, and the thing is that the biggest proof is that there are certain topics that you just can't talk about, right? There are certain things that you don't see on the mainstream media at all. Things that have very little evidentiary basis. So things that really are contrary to the purely scientific liberal worldview. Like if you start questioning, well, you know, when it comes to certain inherent characteristics of male versus female, you know, and when we look at personality traits, when we look at intelligence and IQ scores, when we look at competence in certain kinds of functions like leadership functions, there is a lot of scientific evidence that shows there are significant differences between male and female. This is not presented. Why? Because it contradicts the equality narrative within liberal philosophy that men and women are the same. Men and women are just persons, and this attribute of gender is something that is secondary. It doesn't really affect difference in intelligence, difference in personality, difference in inherent capabilities or aptitude. This is something that's not discussed. Why? Because you have a certain liberal myth that has to be maintained, and you're not going to present anything that contradicts that. Other examples can be given regarding sexuality, regarding, you know, the viability of democracy compared to other forms of government. Religion, you don't see any presentations of anyone taking religion very seriously. Like, maybe the U.S. should become a theocracy. Like, do you see any movies or TV programs that seriously consider this thesis and present it? No. No, you don't see any kind of programming like that. So this shows the level of overt control. Where you do see people talking about these things are on the margins of the internet. And this is how the internet as a technology has disrupted conventional media. And let's talk about that, like the digital media aspect. So when it comes to digital media, there's also conglomerates now, because you have the three most important digital media companies are Alphabet. Alphabet owns Google, they own YouTube, right? The Alphabet Corporation. Then you have Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And then you have Twitter. So these, you could say, are the three biggest. Then you have other companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon. And then maybe you can also include TikTok. Like, these are the main digital media companies. And this creates a big challenge for governments because you can't as easily control discourse. You have the ability for any Joe Schmo to go online, can have just his smartphone camera and start broadcasting, and their videos can potentially reach millions of people. So how do you control this? How can you control the narrative? This becomes a big problem unless you can control the algorithm. Controlling the algorithm is very significant, and we on a previous episode talked about how AI is being used now to control the algorithm to make sure that anything that opposes government narratives is deboosted. Anything in favor of government narratives, that is boosted within the algorithm, within the feed. So what you see is that there's this shift. Digital media has shifted a lot of the narrative in a way that is contrary to Western hegemony. and you have video, you have text, you have media that's reaching millions, if not hundreds of millions of people, that is ridiculing liberal ideology, ridiculing these liberal myths, questioning the scientific worldview. Muslim Skeptic is an example of that. We reach millions of people, and we're advancing something that's contrary to liberalism, and we're often ridiculing and laughing at liberalism. We're spreading politically incorrect facts. We're spreading quote-unquote conspiracy theories because we're questioning Western narratives. And we face censorship for this. At any moment, the whole channel can be deleted. And this is a good opportunity to tell you to sign up for our newsletter. Because if we do get banned from social media, we need to contact you. So subscribe to our newsletter. You can go to muslimskeptic.com/newsletter and just put in your email. We're not going to spam you, don't worry. But in case we get banned off of these social media companies, we need a way to reach you. So that's how we'll do it, is through email. But also alternative channels like Rumble. We have a Rumble channel, so make sure you to go and subscribe to that. But the point is that if you start questioning these narratives, then you're going to start to get marginalized. And there are many examples of outlets that have been banned, marginalized, or banned. So sometimes just marginalization is not enough because the person is too popular. So someone like Donald Trump, you can tweak the algorithm to deboost Donald Trump, but eventually they decide to completely ban him. He was president of the United States, but he gets banned off of all social media: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. They all just shut it down. They all in a synchronized way. We saw the same thing with Andrew Tate. Just in one fell swoop, he's banned off of all of social media. Even his payment processors are shut down. Same thing with Alex Jones. And there are other examples of individuals as well that they just get shut down in this coordinated type of way. And it's a cost, to do this. Like, it's a big cost to reveal your hand, that you're going to exercise this overt power. The hidden hand is much more powerful, but if you're going to show your hand by shutting it down, then everyone knows, like, okay, this is just a facade of free speech. This is a facade of an open playing field, a fair playing field. It's just a lie, and you've just revealed the lie by overtly banning these voices. So there's a big cost to that. So imagine the threat that these governments actually face, that they're willing to show themselves and show the kind of power that they have and control that they have over speech, that they would actually do it. So the thing is that a lot of these outlets like Alex Jones or Andrew Tate or Donald Trump, because they're going off of the establishment script, they're more popular. Like, they gain a lot of popularity. Why? Because it's just more fun. It's more interesting. When you compare what they're saying to what you will watch on CNN or these government-aligned establishment media outlets, it's just much more entertaining. These other outlets seem like they're boring. They're tightly controlled. They just look like propaganda. It's like, this is boring stuff. Like, who cares? And this is why we see the ratings of some of these news channels like MSNBC, CNN, tanking. Also, newspaper outlets, like, their readership is tanking. The Washington Post, the New York Times, they have fewer and fewer readers. And then these alternative, the alt perspective, alt outlets, they're gaining in popularity. This is a disaster. This is an unmitigated disaster for Western liberal governments. And the same thing like with Muslim Skeptic. Like, a lot of people will prefer to watch our videos, watch our debates, read our articles, because when you compare it to some of these compassionate imams, it's like, it's boring. You can tell that it's contrived, it's controlled. It's just pushing like a liberal line, like liberal Islam. You're just taking liberalism and putting a hijab on it and a kufi on it, and you're saying, oh, this is Islam. People can see through that. increasingly. So that's why you see those kinds of outlets or those kinds of personalities dropping in popularity relative to those who are going to speak honestly about Islam. So decentralized free speech is making it possible to talk about the politically incorrect facts, to talk about the conspiracy theories. And this can create social unrest. So what happens is that the governmental authorities say that, okay, this is dangerous. This is something that is creating instability and potentially violence. So we have to exercise censorship. And again, they did this with Trump. So leading up to the 2020 election, they were saying that Trump is inciting people to commit violence, and this is why we have to ban him. There was also the Capitol insurrection. This is a violent event. This shows why we need tighter controls on social media. Also, Brexit in the UK. This was seen as, oh, this is a cause of violence. We have to shut it down. We have to shut down the far-right parties. They're associated with instability in countries like France, Italy, and Germany, or the Netherlands and Hungary. So all of these events that happened around the globe were enabled by the use of digital media. Digital media spreading politically incorrect views or conspiracy theories or hate, and therefore they have to be shut down. You know, the red pill manosphere that Andrew Tate is associated with. Oh, this is leading to violence against women. We have to shut it down. You had a lot of the anti-vaccine narrative or the anti-COVID restriction narrative that has to be shut down. This is dangerous. You have this kind of great replacement theory coming from white nationalists, so that has to be shut down. It's dangerous. It's leading to far-right movements. So all of this is how they justify it, on the basis of there's a danger, there's a threat. So now you have governments that are even penalizing legally some of these internet companies, social media companies. In the EU, for example, you have laws that say that, well, if you don't restrict hate speech as we define it, if you don't restrict extremism as we define it, conspiracy theories as we define it, the EU, the government, then we're going to fine you, we're going to penalize you, or we're going to just ban you. Your company won't be allowed to serve. Our country won't be able to access your services. So these are the laws that are passed. And then furthermore, if someone commits a crime like a violent attack, then your company is financially liable. So let's say someone goes on Twitter and sees something criticizing LGBT, and that individual goes and commits a crime or some violence against an LGBT person, then not only that person is going to be, convicted for their crime and penalized, but also Twitter, because Twitter didn't ban or censor that text that was read by the criminal, by the attacker. So the companies can now be liable for the actions of their users. So this is a huge liability, and it's backed by force of law. So you have these community guidelines that are meant to reduce that liability, and the community guidelines that all of the creators have to abide by on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, those are directly dictated by Western governments. And this is not seen as a free speech violation because, it's a private company. The private company of Google is restricting your speech. So if you don't like it, get off of Google. Don't use any Google service. Don't use YouTube. Don't use Twitter, Facebook, etc. This is just a conceit. Like, this is just a clear deception. People, if they understand like the way that the law works, they can easily recognize this trick. So what else? Also the incentives that are given. Because you have incentives from the government given to these corporations, these big tech companies. So look at this. Google's true origin partly lies in CIA and research grants for mass surveillance. So these companies, they play ball, they get millions in grants. This is a huge incentive for them. And then if they don't censor and ban in the way that the government wants, then they face legal action, legal consequences. The US government wants to break up Facebook, and they'll say, oh, this is antitrust, this is a monopoly, Facebook has to be basically gutted. Why? What's the underlying reason? Oh, well, because of Russian disinformation. Facebook allows Russian disinformation. They didn't do enough to stop Russian disinformation, which allowed Trump to get elected. So Trump is the anti-establishment candidate. There wasn't enough done to prevent him from gaining this kind of popularity on social media. So there has to be a crackdown. And the government has to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. You can't have a figure like Trump, anti-establishment, who comes to power and is able to influence hundreds of millions of people, not only in the US, but in Europe and around the world. We have to make sure this doesn't happen again. So there was a complete rehaul of community guideline policies to tighten control over big tech. So you see all of this, and yet they want to claim this is all free speech. We care about freedom of thought in the enlightened West. Yeah, so conspiracy theories, anything that contradicts the governmental narrative on history, certain events in history, you're banned. These are conspiracy theories. So those are the three things. Conspiracy theories, hate, extremism, misinformation. Like they keep expanding these categories for what counts as information that can be banned. Like there's a reason. Well, we have to ban misinformation. Even though that goes against the principle or the philosophy of free speech. Like free speech is that, well, a lot of when you allow free speech, there's going to be a lot of wrong information out there being discussed. But that's the power of the free market, is that people because they're rational and they've been educated, they'll be able to distinguish between the correct information and the false information. And that's how the best ideas rise to the top, and that's how progress happens. You have the best ideas rising to the top and all of the false ideas or irrational ideas being thrown by the wayside. This is how you achieve progress. If you stifle speech and you stifle thought, then that progress can't actually take place. So that whole philosophy has been thrown in the trash. And they're saying that no, now we have to make sure only correct information can get disseminated. Forget about the free marketplace of ideas and critiquing. And that's the more honest answer, actually, because people are stupid. Like, people aren't rational. When there is all this information, what actually comes out on top? It's basically whatever is seen as beautiful, attractive, pleasurable. You can easily manipulate people to support any idea on the basis of, just have a beautiful spokesman for that idea, or just promise money or sex or pleasure. And those ideas are going to win out just because people are very easily manipulated. That's the whole idea behind sex sells and advertising. Like, these kinds of advertisements play on psychological deficiencies that people have in determining what is true and what is false. Like, that's the only way that advertising works. How do you get people to want and desire a product that they don't necessarily need? Well, you have to exploit certain psychological features of the human mind, and you count on the fact that people aren't rational. The fact that you can exploit these things is a product of the irrationality of human beings. Because a rational person would say, well, do I really need to buy a new phone? Like the latest Apple iPhone? Do I really need it? Do I really need to, buy the latest shoes or clothes? Or do I really need it? The rational person will say, no, this money is better spent on other things. But you have to exploit the irrationality of people that they are going to be influenced by, wow, my favorite celebrity got a new iPhone. Well, you know, that's a good idea. Maybe I should get one too. Or, oh, wow, if I wear these shoes, women will be more attracted to me. Okay, well, better do it. So this is the way that this free market idea, the marketplace of ideas, this is completely bunk, you know, in principle, because within any free market, you have actors that can manipulate that market to their advantage. Very, you know, immediately the market gets hijacked, and that's what these governments have realized. These Western governments, or maybe they knew it all the time, but now that their power they're no longer the biggest game in town, or their power has waned in relative to other actors. Then it's like, okay, the market is being manipulated away from our narrative. Therefore, we have to we have to cancel the free market of ideas. That's what's happening right now in real time. So that is media control. If you enjoyed that presentation and this kind of analysis, then take liberal mind control at ISLAMIC, because we have a whole course. It's like a 4 or 5 hour course, and you can see more details, a lot of academic references. You can download the book associated with the course, and it's almost 100 pages of notes and references, and you can study that, and you'll get a really good idea of how Western free speech is just a cheap facade for control. Okay, so let's now switch gears and lighten the mood by reacting to some videos. Let's react to some videos, and these videos were sent by some of you, and I thought they're worth reacting to, inshallah. By the way, what do you think of this kind of control of social media? Put your comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more shows of the Haqiqat show. Okay, now let's bring up some videos. My headphones here. Okay, dokie. Okay, this is funny.
Basketball and you're shooting, and you say,
oh wait, inherent. Okay.
hey, oh, that didn't go in. Oh my gosh, well, you know, the rim, they should maybe make the rim a little bigger. I could score more often. Do you realize 2 basketballs can fit exactly side by side through the opening of a basketball hoop?
Really?
Yes.
I guess that makes sense.
2 basketballs.
Tough squeeze.
Now, it's not a cosmically mind-blowing moment, but that gives you perspective next time you watch a basketball game. It's how these guys can fly from the foul line in an airborne slam dunk and not miss, because the area of this opening is 4 times, you do the math, it's 4 times as large as the ball itself.
Right, because of the different positions it could be in.
So there are multiple positions, and they can still do it.
Wow. You know, this is the big, Like this is Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's known for like, these mind-blowing facts about the universe, and he brings his scientific knowledge of physics, and he'll just blow your mind. Like, did you know that the force of gravity of a black hole is so strong that not even light can escape it? Like, whoa. But I guess he's like run out of scientific facts. Like, he has to get into basketball. Like, did you know the basketball is half the size of the rim? Whoa. This is just mind-blowing. Like, he's sitting in front of Joe Rogan, of all people. And Joe Rogan's like, oh, wow, that's really amazing. And he also doesn't seem to know like how a slam dunk works. Like, he said that the reason that you don't miss a slam dunk is because the rim is so much larger than the ball. That's not the reason that you miss a slam dunk. The slam dunk just goes in and you can't miss. It's because your hand is literally going on the rim. You're literally putting the ball in there. If the rim was much smaller, if you slam dunk it, it'll still go in with high probability because you're literally putting it in. So this is Neil deGrasse Tyson. I guess he's lost his edge. I really don't like the guy. As someone who also has a physics degree and has studied theoretical physics and cosmology, like, I find him like, he's a popularizer of science, but he does it like in a grating, annoying way. It's just the way that he talks, it has this condescension that it is annoying. So when he's being condescending or talking about basketball like this, it makes it sound really funny to me. Okay, let's go. Next clip.
Did you know, for example, that some animals don't die? Crocodiles, alligators, flounders, they just keep getting larger. They don't die at all. They're just as vigorous at 70 as they are at 5. So how come your textbook says that crocodiles die at age 70? That's because the zookeeper died at age 70, okay? Crocodiles just keep on going. They have no known finite lifespan. They simply get bigger. So in the animal kingdom, you know, it's not necessary to die or age. They just keep getting bigger. That's why you don't see gigantic crocodiles, is because they die of starvation, accidents, or disease. But they have no finite lifespan.
That's interesting. I don't know. That the speaker there is Michio Kaku. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. But he's another one of these annoying theoretical physicists. He's like a Western supremacist. One time I'll bring clips of him talking about like how much superior blue jeans and McDonald's is to other cultures, something like that. But yeah, I don't know if what he's saying about crocodiles is true. Like, crocodiles have no known lifespan. But I definitely know that animals like tortoises can live 200 years or more. There's also the case of the Greenland shark. This is a shark that can live over 400 years. And sharks are fish, right? So fish that can live 400 years. Apparently, my dad was telling me yesterday about, he had a conversation with one of his friends who has a bird, like a cockatoo. And the cockatoo was 15 years old. And he said, wow, that's a really old bird. And the owner said, well, this is nothing. Like, this is young. Cockatoos can live into their 80s. And I don't know if that's true, but that's shocking if it is, like a bird living close to a century. But I mean, the science of aging, this is something that is interesting. I've read some news articles about it, but it seems like there are certain hormones that cause aging, like certain chemicals that are released in the body that will precipitate the aging process. But if that hormone is not released, or those chemicals are not released into the body, then there's no reason why your cells cannot keep reproducing as long as you're eating, as long as you don't get some kind of disease, as long as you don't have an accident. Then there's no reason why the cells cannot continue to reproduce, perpetuating you for how many ever years, even centuries. So we know of life forms that do live centuries, like I said, tortoises, the Greenland shark, maybe certain types of birds, maybe crocodiles, trees, obviously. Trees can live over 1,000 years, depending on what kind of tree it is. So this gives a perspective on those who say that, well, when we read about prophets in the Quran, or Nuh, who lives almost a century, or a millennia, he lived almost 1,000 years, or you read about Khidr, for example, in certain traditions, that he's lived for centuries. These kinds of very large ages or age spans, lifespans, these are not necessarily unscientific. It's conceivable, it's possible for a human being to live hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not irrational to think that that's the case. It's not metaphysically impossible, and it seems physically impossible. It seems physically possible if a crocodile or a shark or a tortoise can live for centuries, then why couldn't a human being? And this kind of, brings into perspective some of these traditions that we will read, or when we read the Quran about Nuh, the prophet Noah, for example, or other Anbiya who they lived longer lifespans. Well, maybe why we in present time we don't live those longer lifespans is because of maybe there is just more disease, there's less barakah in the world. Maybe our sins. We know that our sins can bring new diseases, and this is coming from the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that as we go into the last days, there will be new diseases that have been unknown because of the sins of people, because of sins that people commit, like fornication, etc., will become common, and then new diseases will become common. So maybe we're just living in a sicker, more diseased time, and that's why people typically don't live over 80 years or over 75 years or 65 years. It's because of our actions, but the human capacity or potential is for much longer lifespans, as we read about with previous nations and prophets, etc. So just something to keep in mind. That was a thought-provoking clip, I think. Let's go to the next one.
Finite lifespan.
We are a little bit tight for time, so I probably can't do my Islamic bit. Well, obviously, I'm not going to be telling the same jokes about Muhammad. I'd feel very comfortable telling about Jesus Christ, and that's because, fun fact, I'm not an idiot. So if you're a Christian and you're sat there thinking, well, that's not fair, he'll make jokes about Christians all day long, but he won't make the same sort of jokes about Muslims, well then maybe, as a Christian, you should think about blowing something up. Hey?
I was very pleased with that one.
No one's scared of you. What are the Christians going to do? Forgive me.
Wow, he really appreciated his own joke there. Never seen someone laugh at their own joke like that. Yeah, it's kind of like old material. Like this is an old joke. Like, oh, Muslims are violent, or Muslims, they're they blow things up. Oh, yeah, we've heard this joke. Get some fresh material. But it was funny to me how much he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the joke himself. He's laughing louder than the audience. So, but get some fresh material.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Rahan. So I was relaxing when I thought, I'm a queen who wants to complete half her deen, so why not get started, inshallah.
So the Muslim, some of our Muslim youth on TikTok sent me this and like, please respond to this. And it's just nauseating. Like, I don't use TikTok. So when I see stuff like this, and this is like Muslim TikTok. It's quite nauseating.
I downloaded the app, which I recently discovered, and let me tell you, the whole process of making your account was super fun and super creative. So I went ahead and entered my email, gender, my name, all the basic facts of who I am. And look at how cute. I'm just obsessed. So my phone obviously still thinks I'm in Turkey, but no, I am so in
cute.
LA. Hardcore Cali girl here. You put your family of origin, what you think makes you attractive, your professional projects, your religious stream and Sunni, how practicing you are, how you adapt your religion to your life, your religious concerns, which I thought were super cute, your marital status, who you live with, your marriage plans, if you want babies. You enter what appeals to you, and obviously these characteristics, and also having a full beard, please. I will run away from your patchy beard. I'm scared. Just kidding. We accept all beards here. Adding my photos was so much fun, and after it was all done, you could also blur your photos if you choose.
So why would you add photos if you're gonna blur them? It's like, I added my photos, which was so much fun. Okay, then why? If you're adding them, then why is there a blur option? Just don't add your photos. How about that?
Now let's get started, inshallah.
I challenge.
That's disgusting. So these are basically dating apps, but they're marketing to Muslims and they're pretending like this is something Islamic. Oh, blur your photos and put your religiosity. Are you religious? Oh, definitely have a beard. Like, what kind of simp is going to fall for this type of marketing? It's nauseating. It's disgusting. They're just profiting off of these poor Muslim youth who are desperate, unfortunately, because the halal has been blocked from them. And then you have these Muslim women who are going, creating these profiles. They're getting all this attention from Muslim men, and they think that they're queens. Like, she literally said, I'm a queen. And she has these high expectations. So she just put your pictures on TikTok and these apps and pretend like you're a queen. So this is really disgusting. Okay, next clip.
Challenge my audiences when I tell them that I know you won't believe this, but even though I'm a rabbi, I don't believe in God. And they say, oh, that's not possible. I said, well, the truth is, I don't know any rabbi that believes in God. They say, oh, come on, we've heard rabbis talk about God. But the truth is that even Moses didn't believe in God. Oh, where do you get that from? Because you will not find the word God in the Bible. We have to go back to the...
So this is in line with the conversation I had with a Jewish scholar, Duvid. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch the debate I had with him. I had a debate with him. He's a practicing Jew, Orthodox Jew, and then I had a separate conversation with him. And he also said that over 50% of rabbis, I think he said over 50%, don't actually believe in God. And I was shocked. Like, these are rabbis. I thought amongst the general Jewish community, 50% didn't believe in God. But he's saying even rabbis, like the religious teachers, 50% don't believe in God. And then this rabbi is saying that he's never met a rabbi who believes in God. This is shocking.
Original Bible, and we have to go back to what our sages have told us the meaning of words are. The word Yud He Vav He, which we don't pronounce, we generally say Hashem, has been translated in God. And the word God has a lot of cultural baggage connected to it. And we'd probably be better off not using the word God. The name Yud He Vav He is associated with the attribute of love. And therefore, it's almost as if every time you see that word, you should think, and love spoke to Moses. That would be a very different experience. But a lot of people, their image of God is a very angry being and just wants all this praise.
That you got.
Wow. So talk about like a libtard reform of religion. We don't even want to use the word God anymore. And do you know whenever you see the word God, it actually means love? So it's not really, the Bible is not really about God. Moses wasn't talking to God. He was talking to love. It was love that commanded Moses to wipe out Amalek. You're right, man. It was love that sent the plague that plagued Pharaoh. It was love, not God. So this is shocking. And it seems like he's like an ordained rabbi, or it's not just some random Joe Schmo. So, but I can just imagine the next iteration of compassionate imams, because it's a continuous devolvement. Basically, the compassionate imams we have today, that's how Christians and Jews were talking 100 years ago. So and things are accelerating. So maybe in a generation or two, you will have imams, Muslims, who talk like this. Like, oh, don't think about Allah in the Quran as being a God. This is really love, and we know that one of the names of Allah is Al-Wadud, the loving. So really think about it as love. We don't need a concept of God. That's just the wrong idea, like a God that punishes you or that has requirements for you, and it has halal and haram and hudud, like limits and laws. Like, don't think about God like that. Think about God as just love, God is just love. I mean, this is pretty much what compassionate imams are already saying. It's not even that big of a stretch. But they're going to get even more explicit, even more deranged. So just like you can have a rabbi who doesn't believe in God, you can have an imam, a pastor who doesn't believe in God. Those also, you have counterparts, Christian counterparts, pastors who don't believe in God. You're going to have imams who don't believe in God.
Their image of God is a very angry being and just wants all this praise.
That you guys continue in your community, continue converting people, because we've all been stripped of our identity. Our youth don't have any identity. That's why they're coming to your ideology, giving them something to belong to. Plus the Western women, right? The Western women are meeting these Muslim men. These Muslim men are saying to these Western women, you are so precious. You are so important. I want no one to look upon your beauty other than me and Allah, right? This is what your men are telling our Western women. So I'll be your husband, right? But you'll be in a home. You'll be breeding, right? We're gonna have babies. We're gonna worship, and you're gonna cover because you're that important. So that's what you've got there. And then you've got a lot of Western men, not all of them, but a lot of Western men that are worried about what their eyebrows look like, going on sunbeds, watching the football. So what do you think is? I'm not silly here. I can see what these women are coming to. I see what's going on here. The natural instinct for a woman is to find a man that is going to be protective.
All right, so this is a clip from Five Pillars, the Blood Brothers podcast. Check it out. Dilly was interviewing a far-right or former far-right activist in the UK. So they have a whole conversation, but this clip is she's saying, well, why are women, these Western women, these white women converting to Islam? Is because Muslim men provide this kind of protection. They provide this kind of respect. They value women in this way that Western men do not. And that's the attraction of Islam. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I think that's very interesting that she would admit this and praise Muslims and praise Islam for this. And it's true, like if you take away people's identity, as liberalism tends to do, like you're not, you basically destroy their religion. So Christianity is just a bunch of mythology, and it's barbaric, and you can't be Christian, obviously. We're dedicated to a scientific worldview. You can't take Christianity seriously, so you take out that aspect of it. You take out nationalism, so don't be proud of your nation. Don't be proud of your culture or heritage or race. Don't be proud of your gender either, because, being man or woman, it's pretty much the same thing. And maybe you want to choose your gender, or you have a different gender that's different from your physical body. So and every source of identity has been undermined. And then you have Muslims coming in, and they're very strong in their Muslim identity, and they're not willing to compromise on it. They're not willing to assimilate into the broader liberal culture. They're very committed to being Muslim. Then that is attractive. That, okay, I want something to believe in. I want to be part of something. I want to identify as part of a community. So that's very attractive, not only to women, it's attractive to men. And this is why you see this kind of conversion to Islam. But it's also under attack. The Islamic identity is under attack as well. And you have some of these liberalized Muslims who are jettisoning, they're discarding their Islamic identity, their Muslim identity, because they want to claim, oh, we're just like everyone else. We don't have these distinctive beliefs. Or if we do, we keep it to ourselves. It's private, so you automatically eliminate the communal aspect of Islam. And anything that makes Islam unique, like when it comes to marriage values, like very specific gender roles in Islam, like very specific ideals of fasting or ritual worship, or staying away from alcohol or drugs or fornication, being against LGBT, etc. Like these are things that are constantly being attacked. And you have these weak, liberal, libtard Muslims who will just jettison. They will disavow all of these aspects of Islam for the sake of saying, I'm just like you. I'm just like the average Westerner. I'm, and then you have some of these liberal Muslims in Pakistan as well, like these Muslim Pajits, who are also saying, no, we're just liberal. We're feminists, we're liberal, we're pro-LGBT, we're pro-democracy, etc. They're also quickly discarding their unique Islamic identity. So they're following the West down the lizard hole. And then sometimes you have to see someone who has been through that, their community has been through that, say like, hey, wake up, don't follow us down the lizard hole. So, okay, so hope you enjoyed those reactions. Now let's get into talking about Zionism, the final part of the show, inshallah, where we talk about Zionist influence on atheism first, and then Zionist influence on Islam. So we talked about Zionist influence on Christianity, the history of that in the 20th century. Go watch that in episode 2. Now let's switch gears and talk about the influence of Zionism on atheism. And what's interesting is that just like traditional Christianity, atheism as well, beginning in the 18th century Enlightenment, was also very anti-Semitic. They're very critical of Jews and Judaism in this Enlightenment atheism. And the thing is that these Enlightenment atheists were critical of all religions, including Christianity and Islam, but they were very critical of Judaism. And they viewed Judaism as the worst religion, basically. And there are two people that you can consider. One is Voltaire, and Voltaire was very anti-Islam as well. And he had he mocked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he was even more critical of Judaism. And then you also have another Baron de Holbach, who was another one of these Enlightenment atheists, also very critical of Jews in this, anti-Semitic type of way. So let me show you these articles. Let's see. Voltaire spread darkness, not enlightenment. France should stop worshipping him. The celebrated philosopher was an unapologetic racist and anti-Semite who inspired Hitler. The recent removal of his statue in Paris was long overdue. So this is Voltaire, and he has a lot of very harsh statements against Jews. But I find this really ironic. If you're going to cancel Voltaire from the 18th century, you have to basically cancel the entire Enlightenment, because most of these Enlightenment thinkers, if not all of them, were white supremacists. They believed in the superiority of the white race, and they were anti-Semites. So you have to basically delete and cancel all of these Enlightenment figures. You have to delete most of the founding fathers of America as well. They were also white supremacists and anti-Semitic. So then what's left, right? What's left of the Enlightenment? Like, what's left of the crown jewel of the Western tradition, which is this Enlightenment philosophy of freedom and equality and democracy, freedom of thought, liberation. All of this is based, these are the brainchild of racist, white supremacist, anti-Semites. You have to cancel them all. Then you have Baron de Holbach as well. He was the most radical critic of Jews and Judaism among the French rationalists and encyclopedists of his generation. As a disciple of the English deists who condemned revealed religion, de Holbach criticized Judaism as being the most particularist of all religions. Like, it's the most anti-universalist, according to de Holbach. And we can read some of the quotes from Voltaire. For example, Voltaire said, talking about Jews, he said, "They are all of them born with raging fanaticism in their hearts, just as the Britons and the Germans are born with blonde hair. I would not be in the least bit surprised if these people would not someday become deadly to the human race." So this is quoted in the academic article Voltaire on Judaism and Christianity. So anti-Semitic to the bone. Baron de Holbach gives there are a lot of quotes from him that are very bitterly anti-Semitic. He says, for example, "However slightly we cast our eyes over the history of the Jews as contained in their sacred books, we are forced to acknowledge that these people were at all times the blindest, the most stupid, the most credulous, the most superstitious, and the silliest that ever appeared on the earth." And it just continues like this, like very, very anti-Judaism, and specifically targeting Jews as a people, as a culture. So this is interesting. Like, this is what atheism, this big atheistic movement in the Enlightenment, this is what it's all about. Or it's criticizing Christianity, it's criticizing Islam, but when it gets to Judaism, that's when they really they stop pulling the punches and they go all out. So while this Enlightenment atheism was critical of Judaism, that's not the case with all atheistic movements, because later you have communist atheism beginning in the 19th century and then really flourishing in the 20th century. And you have new atheism, which is more like from the past 20 years. And they are not anti-Jewish at all. And in fact, they seem to be pro-Jewish, pro-Judaism, or they have like a soft spot for Judaism and instead focus on Christianity and Islam. And in the same way that we can call like the Enlightenment atheism as anti-Semitic, we can say that the communist and the new atheist movements were Islamophobic in a lot of ways, if we want to use those types of terms. So you have a lot of these ethnically Jewish individuals involved with communist atheism and with new atheism. So to give you a brief rundown, so you have someone like Karl Marx, obviously. You have Lenin. These are ethnic Jews, atheists, promoters of atheism, communist atheism. And then you have Trotsky as well. And then in the new atheist movement, you have Sam Harris. He's ethnically Jewish. You have Bill Maher. And you have Christopher Hitchens, who discovered that he had later in life that he has Jewish heritage. So the communist atheism and new atheism, they don't have the same kind of critique of Judaism that the Enlightenment atheists have. Instead, you have this criticism of Christianity, and their most bitter criticism is against Islam. And they'll say that Judaism is like the least problematic of all religions. Like Sam Harris explicitly says that. Sam Harris says, because he gets called out, like, why are you not criticizing Judaism? Why are you not criticizing the actions of Israel on the basis of religious justifications from the Torah and the Talmud? Sam Harris says openly, like, no. Judaism is not a problem. Judaism, I don't agree with Judaism, but it's not the mother lode of bad ideas like Islam. It's not dangerous like Christianity. And this is the argument that they give. They say that they give two reasons generally. They say that Islam and Christianity, they have more followers than Judaism. So they have to be singled out for special critique and special repression even. They have to be violently repressed. And a lot of the communist regimes repressed Christianity and Islam. You see this with the Soviet-era Russia, where many churches were completely destroyed. Many priests from the Orthodox Church were killed and assassinated. Mosques within Central Asia under Soviet control were demolished. Imams by the tens of thousands were massacred and killed. This is violent repression. Whereas at the same time, you had, anti-Semitism laws within Soviet government. Anti-Semitism became a major crime within Soviet-era Russia, but at the same time, you're killing and destroying churches, killing Christians and Muslims, and destroying mosques. So, and Muslims in Central Asia still have not recovered from this, these kinds of this kind of repression, genocide, even, because millions were killed. Millions were killed for their religion. So this is communist atheism. And this is especially was a problem in Soviet Russia. New atheists also, like new atheists will point out Islam and Christianity as the biggest purveyors of violence, intolerance, unscientific attitudes. Islam and Christianity are the biggest source of these kinds of problems. And they'll also critique Christian culture. They'll critique Islamic culture, Muslim culture. So it's not just a problem with the Quran or the Bible. The problem is that these books have influenced the culture, and the culture has become violent. Muslim and Christian culture is violent, and that's why it needs to be repressed, because it's dangerous. These are some of the ideas that are coming from someone like Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Bill Maher, Dawkins as well, who's not Jewish, but these are the types of attitudes that they spread. But if you critique the Talmud, or you critique the Torah, or you make claims about Jewish culture, then that's seen as anti-Semitism. You are an anti-Semite for critiquing these books. You're an anti-Semite for critiquing Judaism. I've been attacked, because I'm bringing these kinds of criticisms of Jewish texts, and I'm smeared as an anti-Semite. And I point out, well, when you have these new atheists critiquing the Quran, no one is saying that they're Islamophobic. And even if they are accused of Islamophobia, they're not silenced and they're not shut down. But if I critique their religious books, and I'm critiquing Judaism along with Christianity, along with Hinduism, I'm a critic of religions, then I'm an anti-Semite and I have to be shut down. This is the double standard, but it's coming from this soft spot or blind spot that we see within New Atheism against Judaism. So this can be called the Zionist influence on atheism, or Zionist atheism. And we see like some of the biggest critics of Islam today are these atheists. Sam Harris, Bill Maher, Douglas Murray is another one from the UK, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. You see a lot of these ex-Muslim atheists online who magically have these pro-Zionist views. They hate all religions because they're atheists. All religions are irrational. But for some reason, they don't have any criticism of Judaism. And I brought this to light when I debated Apus earlier this year. We had a debate on, well, what is really the cause of violence and the source of war? Is it Islam or Judaism when it comes to Israel and Palestine? And so I would bring up these very violent passages from the Talmud or from the Torah, from the Hebrew Bible. And he had no words of condemnation. I'd say, do you condemn this? Like, you condemn something far less violent in Islam, like Islam's doctrine of jihad. You're condemning it. You view it as barbaric. But here's something far more violent in the Talmud. You know, the Torah is explicitly commanding genocide, killing women and children. You don't see anything like that in the Quran or in Hadith. But you have all of this criticism of Islam, and you portray Islam as this bloodthirsty religion. But when I present these texts from Judaism to you, and how a lot of the Israeli Jews, religious Jews, are applying these verses to kill and terrorize Palestinians, you have nothing to say. You have no condemnation. So you're not a serious critic of religion. You're just a Zionist. You are advocating this Zionist atheism. So this is the irony. And these new atheists, and even the communist atheists, they always claim to be these fearless free thinkers. Oh, we welcome debate. We will debate any ideas. We are open to, we're not scared like these religious zealots who can't think outside the box. They're closed-minded. They're scared to be questioned by us, by our superior intellects. But when you bring in this point about, well, what about Judaism? What about the Talmud? What about these religious texts coming from one specific religion? Then they have nothing to say. Then they get angry, actually. They get angry. They call you an anti-Semite, and they want to get you banned off of social media. Yeah, so much for fearless free thinkers, right? Okay. So that is the Zionist influence on atheism. Now let's get to the Zionist influence of Islam, on Islam. And this is some shocking stuff here as well. So over the past 2 decades, Zionist groups have begun a transformation of Islam in the same way that they tried to transform, or they did transform, a lot of Christianity, Catholic and Protestant. Christianity reformed it. You have the same attempts on Islam. And these policies began with the War on Terror after 9/11, CVE policies, countering violent extremism, and then eventually the Abraham Accords. So these kinds of initiatives, historically since 9/11, have been meant to get Muslims to be more aligned with Israel, be more open to Israel, normalize relations with Israel. And you have these Muslim political and religious leaders, so-called Muslim political and religious leaders, who promote a kind of perennialism. This idea that, well, you don't have to be a Muslim to attain salvation. You can be Christian and you can be Jewish. You can be a Jew and reject the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you can still attain salvation. So these are not, random imams. These are imams that are backed by governments, specifically in the Muslim world, specifically in the Gulf. So these are the same Muslim leaders who not only say you can accept these other religions, but also you should be okay with Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Yeah, well, is Masjid al-Aqsa that important? Yeah, do we really need to care so much about Palestinians? Yeah, they're just one group of oppressed Muslims. There are oppressed Muslims throughout the world. So, why focus only on Palestine? Like, this seems like you're just obsessed. Like, you hear these kinds of perspectives. And then you have these religious leaders who are promoting that and pushing that. So then you have like these madkhalis, and I've talked extensively about the madkhalis, and they say that, well, if you criticize the pro-Israel policies of Muslim governments, then you are a deviant, or you are actually an apostate. They will takfir you. This is what they've done against me. They say that, well, you're criticizing these Gulf governments because of their normalization of economic ties with Israel. Therefore, you are khariji. You are basically a terrorist. You're a deviant. And they've made countless videos on me. They've written countless articles about me, denouncing me. Why? Because I don't think that Muslim governments should normalize with Israel and enable the genocide of Palestinians. So the main figures on social media promoting this Muslim Zionism are figures like Faris al-Hamadi and others, which I'll go through. But look at this. If you don't know who Faris Hamadi is, I call him Rabbi Faris. Here's Rabbi Faris. This guy is literally, just 7 years ago, he was doing CrossFit. He was a CrossFit coach, and he had a gym in the UAE. That was his job. And then suddenly he became a sheikh, a scholar, and he goes online and he says outrageous things that we'll talk about. So, my girl's stronger than you. That's his shirt, as he's doing CrossFit. Very funny shirt to be wearing for a Muslim scholar. And then we can't go through Faris Hamadi's whole record, but he got a lot of heat and a lot of backlash because when there were these boycotts announced against Starbucks and McDonald's, he came out and said that, well, boycotting is haram. Boycotting is haram. You can't boycott Starbucks. And he even at one point said that if you boycott Starbucks, you're a terrorist. He said khariji. Like, he called those who are boycotting as khawarij. So being a khariji basically means you're a terrorist and you're a deviant if you boycott Israel. And if you don't believe me that that's what he said, we can watch this. Here we go. Let's see. Hopefully you can hear this.
Country. When you go to the public and say, hey guys, everyone, we should boycott so and so company. I had a deal with that company. They're paying us. And when we have a deal together, you're ruining that deal. And it's up to the Muslim government that you cannot disobey it like that. If the Muslim government or the ruler says boycott, then yes, because he knows things you don't know. And they have agreements, they have taken care of it. So now he says, okay to boycott. And it happened before. But if it doesn't happen now, meaning that we don't know something, it's going to harm us if we boycott them. Yeah? So boycotting, that's why many of the ulama, they said boycotting is haram. It's not up to you, Habib. It's not up to you. The deal is between the government or the government agency, like, the municipality or the Department of Economy or whatever. They had a deal with so-and-so company. You come and say to the people, hey, don't buy from them. Why? Who are you? What authority do you have? It's not allowed.
It's haram. If you boycott Starbucks, it's haram. McDonald's is haram. What authority do you have? If the ruler says you have to buy McDonald's and you have to support Israeli businesses and you have to support Israel economic ties, you have no choice, Habibi. You have no choice. And if you don't stuff the Big Mac down your gullet, if you don't suck down the Frappuccino from Starbucks, then you are doing something haram and you're a khariji. Eat that Israeli Big Mac. Drink that Israeli Frappuccino, caramel latte or whatever. So this is Faris Hamadi. And he, Rabbi Faris, he came out with this immediately. He's on the ball. Like, he knows, whenever the ummah is going out of line and is doing something haram, like boycotting Israel, he's quick dropping that TikTok video. This is haram. This is haram. You khawarij. And this was this went viral basically. And you had even Zionist accounts, and I think even accounts associated with the Israeli government who were tweeting it and saying, oh, this is what a Muslim scholar is saying, that boycotting Israel is haram. Why don't you listen to your scholars, you deviant Muslims, you terrorists? This is the kind of person Rabbi Faris is. And then he got a lot of backlash. So he's had to retract his stance. So he's made many videos about boycotting because he can't get his story straight. And let's hear what he says. So he was doing this interview with Sneeko, and he ordered a Coke. He's drinking Coca-Cola. So now what's his stance now on boycotting?
With Sneeko. And in that interview, I ordered
a Coke, given the thing that I believe in, that I believe that boycotting in Muslim countries, it is up to the person. And I mentioned in Sneeko's interview.
Oh, now it's up to the person. Boycotting is up to the person. Wait. Didn't you say it was up to the ruler? We saw the video. You said that boycotting is up to the ruler. Now it's up to the person. So if you want to do it, you don't want to do it, it's up to you.
That I don't believe that our franchise, which are located in the UAE or any Muslim country, specifically I'm speaking in the Gulf, it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't benefit our brothers and sisters in Gaza in any kind of way.
It doesn't
the factories
help.
in the UAE, the money's in the UAE, the workers are Muslim, the owner is Muslim. So that fraction of royalty, we call it royalty, that fraction of, they pay for the mother company because of the branding and the ingredients, and it's a franchise.
It's a franchise,
so
yeah.
That, and I said this in the interview. I said this is it's insignificant, that it doesn't.
It's insignificant.
It doesn't affect.
No effect.
And it doesn't benefit Gaza. Doesn't affect or harm Israel.
The royalties.
So I don't think that this is effective. So why should I do it? And so,
okay, so change the story. Before it was it's haram to boycott. You have to get permission from the ruler. He got so much backlash that the Islam apparently changed. Maybe he got revelation. What was haram suddenly is now halal. It's up to you. You can choose. It's mubah, basically. You can boycott. You can't boycott. So look at this spineless coward. And the funny thing is, he doesn't understand boycotting. He doesn't understand franchising. That royalty is like, nothing leaves. When you boycott McDonald's in a Muslim country, nothing is going to go to outside of the Muslim country. Yes, the royalty will leave. The royalty that the franchise collects, that goes to the parent company. As a franchisee, you're giving a percentage, and sometimes it's a significant percentage. You've bought the franchise, so the money that you have spent, like let's say you want to open a McDonald's, you spend $1 million to buy the franchise, to be licensed to use the logo of McDonald's, to use the market or the branding of McDonald's. You're paying for that, like $1 million. So that's money that goes out of your country, out of the UAE. It goes outside to these, wherever that company is located. So that is money that's going outside of your country, number one. Then there's royalties that are every quarter or annually are going from your business, from as a franchisee, to the parent company. So that's number two. Number three, if that franchise suffers because Muslims in the country are boycotting it, then future business owners will not want to buy that franchise. Muslim business owners, millionaires or billionaires in the UAE or in any of these Muslim countries will say, well, I better not buy McDonald's. I better not buy Starbucks because there's a boycott. So let me buy another franchise, a franchise that will have Muslim customers. So then they'll spend that $1 million or the millions of dollars to buy franchises that Muslims will buy food from or buy clothes or whatever from. So this is basic logic. Like, this is how boycotts work. And this Faris, Rabbi Faris, wants to pretend that he doesn't understand any of this. Even though he's a business owner. He had his CrossFit gym. So I'm sure he has like this kind of knowledge of how franchises works, but he's playing dumb. So this is very despicable, disgusting. What a loathsome person. Like, the minimum that Muslims want to do is, I want to do something for my brothers and sisters in Palestine. I can't do much, but the least I can do is I won't buy from these companies that overtly have supported this kind of war against Palestinians. I want to do the minimum. And then immediately this agent, the Zionist agent, comes and says, no, it's haram. It's haram to do even that little bit. Imagine what kind of a sellout agent you have to be. There's not enough, bad things that can be said about such a person. Okay, but Faris Hamadi is not the only Zionist Muslim, quote unquote. You have Zahak Tanvir. He's in prison. Saudi put him in prison. He's the student of Faris Hamadi. He's like a very close associate and student of Faris Hamadi. Turned out he was a spy for the Indian government. There are some reports on that he was a spy for the Indian government, and the Saudi government discovered this and put him in prison. So all he was doing on social media is supporting Israel, supporting the BJP, the Hindutva government, attacking Muslims, oppressing Muslims. So he was also one of these munafiq agents, big supporter of Zionism. Now he's rotting in a jail cell. This is Noor Dahri. He says he's a Zionist Salafi. He's a Zionist Salafi. So he goes and he trains with the IDF. He denounces Palestinians constantly. He says Muslims are terrorists. But he claims to be a Muslim. You have Sajwani, Hassan Sajwani, another one of these Zionists. Luay Sharif, constantly shilling for Israel. Amjad Taha, shilling for Israel. So you have these people, like these sellouts, and they're pushing perennialism, as I mentioned, and they're pushing Zionism, and they're constantly attacking Muslims and Palestinians in favor of the Israeli government. So that's, those are some of the social media personalities. You also have these governmental initiatives, like the Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Societies. This is coming out of the UAE. And you have figures like Abdullah bin Baya, who is a Mauritanian scholar, Sufi, and he is promoting this Forum for Promoting Peace in Muslim Societies. And Hamza Yusuf is his main student and vice president. You can see him, and they're having a nice interfaith dialogue with the Zionists. And Muhammad Majid, he's another one of these sellouts. He's closely involved with promoting Zionism to Muslims. He's often working with Zionist organizations and doesn't really care about Palestinians at all, other than lip service. So these are modeled along the same kind of interfaith dialogue that we discussed with the Vatican and with the Catholic Church. So you have these kinds of forums. You have like these alliances. They call them the Alliance of Virtue, Forum for Promoting Peace. And you're supposed to talk about tolerance and love between all religions. And what these reformists do, these munafiqeen, they will critique Islam. Oh yeah, we have certain extremist ideas, extremist teachings. Like the true message of Islam is to accept all religions and to, make peace. And this is what the interfaith dialogue will consist of. They'll focus on Islam and the action of Muslim extremists, the intolerant Muslims. They'll never discuss Jewish extremists. They'll never discuss Jewish texts, extremist ideas found in these Jewish texts, like the Hebrew Bible, like the Talmud, like the Midrash. These texts, they're not discussed. They are not part of the conversation. It's only the Quran and these problematic verses, quote unquote, of the Quran, problematic hadith, these extremist interpretations. Oh, we have these Salafis or these supporters of Ibn Taymiyyah. We have to root out this extremism. That's what the focus of the interfaith dialogue, the promotion of peace is about. But the other side of the equation, that doesn't get any airtime or discussion. So you have, so these kinds of Bin Baya type, Hamza Yusuf type, that's the Sufi side of Zionist Islam, quote unquote. The Salafi side are the Madkhalis, like the Faris Hamadi, that whole branch. Who is the other guy? Abu Khadija types. They're the Madkhali, quote unquote Salafi. They pretend to be Salafi, but really they're Zionists. Another development has been the Marrakesh Declaration. So this was a declaration, and you see the ADL of all organizations promoting it. This came out in 2016. And again, it's promoting this same kind of idea that, well, Muslims have extremism, Islam has this extremist element, and we need to defend the rights of religious minorities in predominantly Muslim countries. So Muslims have a problem with oppressing Christians and Jews and atheists, and we need more religious freedom. And they had 250 Muslim religious leaders, heads of state, and scholars sign the declaration. And you also had representative of the persecuted religious communities. So this is like a whole bait and switch. Like, you present this kind of idea that, oh, Muslims are so intolerant and religious minorities are being oppressed. That's the bait. But the switch is, okay, well, now that you've accepted this type of tolerance, then you should be fine with normalizing with Israel. You should be fine with normalizing with Israel. You should be fine with the influence of Israel in your country. You need to be open to Israeli businesses, diplomats influencing your country because you're tolerant, right? This is why an organization like the ADL and also the U.S. State Department and Israel itself, they welcome these types of declarations. Like, it's on the facade, or the facade is for religious freedom, but in reality, it's about normalization of Zionism in these Muslim countries. So, and then the final example, I mean, I could talk endlessly about this kind of Zionism affecting Islam. Oh, this is U.S. Institute of Peace. The Abrahamic Family House, this is also in the Gulf. So they're building this kind of complex. Oh, the Abrahamic families, the Abrahamic religion. This is the perennialism that I'm talking about, that these religions are all acceptable. Islam, Judaism, Christianity, it's all an Abrahamic family, and we all have the same values, and we have this nice complex, the Abrahamic Family House, and this is such a beautiful show of respect and love and tolerance. So you had Pope Francis was involved in this on behalf of the Catholic Church. You had Ahmed al-Tayyib of Azhar the Azhar University in Egypt involved. And they created, these three separate structures. One is a synagogue, one is a church, and one is a mosque. But they're all part of the Abrahamic family. So this is a Zionist front. This is a Zionist initiative. So the whole point is that, even within politics, we talked about how you can have left wing, right wing, but they are pro-Israel. Doesn't matter if you're progressive, if you're conservative, you're pro-Israel. They want the same situation. Doesn't matter if you're atheist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Jew, everyone is pro-Israel. It doesn't matter what religion you are, you're pro-Israel. And you're advancing Israeli interests. That's the entire goal, and it's designed to give you this illusion of free choice. The illusion of, it doesn't matter what religion you are. See the diversity of support behind the Zionist state. This is the whole project. So, they're really pushing this type of influence in the Muslim world, in the Middle East. And it's getting more and more pronounced and more obvious now because of the war in Gaza with Palestine. You can't really hide it. Like, these elements, these Zionist elements, are very obvious now to the Ummah. We see the hypocrites. We see those who are selling out the religion for the sake of Zionism because they want to get a check or they want to gain influence. So alhamdulillah, now that the whole agenda has been busted wide open and we can see it and we can warn against it. And I've been doing that since October 7th and before, specifically with the Madkhalis, with these kind of Hamza Yusuf Sufis associated with Abdullah bin Bayya. And they've attacked me very ruthlessly because of that. And you can see how closely they're tied to Zionist organizations like the ADL. My suspicion was that it was the UAE and these governments that were working with the ADL that decided to put out the hit piece against me and portray me as this extremist supporter of terrorism, anti-Semite. The ADL put out that piece, I believe, in collaboration with some of these governments. Allahu A'lam, but I wouldn't put it past them. Okay, so that is the show. A little bit longer show today, but we had a lot of material to cover. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter on MuslimSkeptic.com so that we can stay in touch. And on the next episode, we're going to do a reaction to a debate between Yasser Qadi and Mustafa Akyol. So it's billed as a debate between like a religious scholar and a Muslim reformist. But as we'll see, it's really a debate, more like a conversation between two reformists. So we're going to go through that debate. I'm going to analyze it for you, and hopefully you'll enjoy that as well. So that's coming up on the next episode. So hope you enjoyed it. Inshallah, we'll catch you on the next one. Inshallah.